digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we are coming at you live from the Elam College in East London at the Women in Games Conference 2017. And we have with us today the lovely Jess Hyder from Epic and Unreal. We have Debbie from Space Ape. We have Rob Yescombe returning once again. Welcome back, Rob. And we have... You have been on the show before. He's looking all weird at us, like, oh.
me.
Wow. You have been on an episode, trust me. And Mookie.
Was I good?
Yeah.
I think 5 out of 20.
That's why you're on again. 7, right?
I appreciate the second chance.
And we have Mookie Kullan back with us once again. Welcome, everybody. So, for the benefit of our lovely listeners who may not have heard who you are last time you was on the show, would you care to explain very briefly who you are, what you do, and we'll start from this end.
Hi everyone, I am Mookie. I've got my own digital production agency called Mookie International. My background is in the music and broadcasting industry with 10 to 12 years at MTV and working with broadcasters across the spectrum, Viacom, Comedy Central, ITV, etc., and brand agencies, record labels, and artists across the digital production space, which is web and apps and live streaming and social content. And within this content production is AR, VR, and immersive content. Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob Yescombe. I am a writer and narrative director working in games for 12 years, do a little bit in movies and predominantly in VR, and that's it.
Do you want to name any of the movies that you may or may not be doing some work on?
No.
Debbie, why don't you explain to us what you do at Space Ape?
Hello, I'm Deborah. I work at Space Ape Games. We are a mobile game developer. I work in content marketing. That means I create a lot of content, naturally. I edit, I run all of our live streams. I also create different marketing campaigns across all of our live titles and also help to sort of situate our titles in development. Before Space Ape, I was at Xbox, and I'm actually a journalist by background.
Wonderful. Yes.
So hello, I'm Jess. I'm the European Community Manager for Unreal Engine. So right now I work with all teams across Europe who use our software to make whatever they're making. My background is in art and animation production, and I used to work on the console edition of Minecraft.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. So having just come fresh off the stage from our Future of VR panel, I thought we would drill down into some of the conversations that we had that we just didn't have the time to expand any further on. And so one of the things I'm going to leap on, and this may sound really weird, but I am going to leap on this, which is one of the comments that Jess made, which is... But it is a bugbear, and I know I've ranted about this before on the show, but I'm going to say it again, which is hygiene. Yes! Hygiene! Basic hygiene. When it comes to...
Not Jess's hygiene.
Yeah, let's move on.
Specify. She smells like
When it comes to VR headsets and putting headsets on people in whatever environment, whether it's a conference, whether it's in somebody's studio, whatever the scenario is, there are very few people who seem to understand the idea and concept of just cleaning the headset or giving somebody a little, protective mask or whatever the thing is. They forget that people do get quite heated and warm once they spend a little bit of time in a headset. So I'm just curious, Jess, from your experience, because you've done all of the shows, you've been at all of the conferences. I know you're at Develop for a fact. And I'm just curious from your experience, what you've observed and seen when it comes to hygiene, whether or not you have begun to see that little shift of maybe people actually at least having a mask or some kind of something.
So yes and no at the same time. So yes, there are definitely more people who have got the protective face covers. They wipe it in between people using it. And no, because I've stood and watched somebody put a headset on 5 different people, and then I've gone up to him and gone, and he's like, oh, do you want to try it? And I'm like, have you cleaned it? And he goes, yes. And I went, you're lying, because I've just watched you put that on 5 people and you haven't cleaned it at all. So it's kind of gone both ways. People realise they need to do it and aren't doing it, and people realise that they do need to do it and are doing it very well. And also, I have to admit, that does also extend to any peripherals that you're holding on to too. Yes. And people do clean them all down. So.
Guys, I think I have the answer to this, which is that instead of us trying to get them to clean it, we should have like ski goggles with the lenses out, and you just wear them to the show, and then you put it on that way.
That is actually how Disney handles it in one of their theme parks. The way that it works is you get given a face rest, which you insert into any of the VR rides.
And you carry it and it's yours.
And you take it with you to the different rides.
And actually, this is a habit I have, which is when I know I'm going to a show where there's going to be a lot of headsets and people are going to ask me to put the headsets on. For a long, long time, I was refusing to put headsets on because I just knew how grimy they were. So I actually ordered online a little kind of blindfoldy goggle thing, and it goes in my pocket. And if I'm going to a show, it's in my pocket, and I know I can just whip that out and put that on, and I'm protected. But it is kind of this whole burden of responsibility for me, the user, to have to do that.
Well, it's kind of gross.
It's like going to the gym, right? It's like you would bring your own equipment. It's like if I'm going boxing, like I would bring my own gloves, my own wraps.
Or you'd at least wipe down the equipment before you use it, right?
you would hope.
Yeah, the gyms provide the spray and the wipes a lot of the time. Yeah. So it's the responsibility of that person showing the booth or whatever to look after their
I'm
audience.
thinking like in the future, hopefully everybody would have their own.
It is the future of VR. In the future.
Tell me now.
I think we're overlooking a sort of pervert contingency that are going to the shows for that.
Yeah.
And I
They're
think
germ collectors.
we just got to like embrace those people. I don't think we should cut them out.
It's definitely the person showing it. It's both their responsibility from a health point of view, but also safety. Because I'm thinking, if they are not even taking the time and effort to clean it, how safe am I going to be when I'm in this VR experience and I can't see anything around me?
And
are
if
they
you're
going to
paranoid
move
about
back?
all that, then you're not going to be interested in the product. You'll be so thinking like my face is going to be zitted out, right?
But this is actually what leads me to the next topic in hand, which is where I was going with this, which is actually a lot of the people who are demoing VR, whether it's at a conference or whatever the event is, don't necessarily understand what they're putting on people's heads. And the fact is, for example, I've seen somebody with, whether it's the Oculus or the HTC Vive, as far as somebody who's never played VR or experienced VR, a big black box is like thrust onto their face, and they're like, "Whoa, what's happening here?" And they're kind of backing away because they don't know what's going on. And it's the fact that there is this lack of training, this lack of understanding for the people who are doing the demoing to just kind of explain, okay, we're going to put this thing on your head, and you're going to be in a different environment when you open your eyes again, and just kind of giving them that reassurance of what exactly is the experience going to be. Yeah. But also leading on from that is that whole self-awareness thing that Mickey was just kind of talking about as well, which is that people are slightly embarrassed to try VR in public because they're a little bit worried about making a fool of themselves or falling over or whatever that thing is. And again, this comes down to if the person who's putting their headset on the person in the first place was able to give them that reassurance that this is a safe environment, you're set, you're not going to fall, don't worry, we've got you, that maybe people wouldn't be quite so paranoid about this stuff. And I'm kind of curious from your experiences at different shows and exhibitions, whether or not you felt that the people who were actually putting the headsets on people knew enough about the technology and enough about the medium that they were giving people a good experience for the first time or not.
I'm probably slightly biased because I often go to the developer shows, which are very different because I don't often do all of the consumer stuff. Yeah, a little bit of Gamescom, but again, it's still they understand it. They're also demoing to other developers who they are assuming know what they're doing with it. How they kind of interact with that space. They've seen some interesting things. They've seen people literally put up little fences around the area so that other people who are watching don't get too close and get literally within kind of flailing zone, as I kind of call it.
Zone, I like that.
But they've also done other things where they pad the floor. So they've got different colour carpets to show where the player is going to be standing, but it also provides kind of a bit of a soft landing if you do fall over. And with me, with motion sickness and stuff, I have to admit, I've fallen over in VR a few times when it's done something I'm not expecting it. So there's different ways of people doing it. But yes, they give a good experience, but they also talk to you in a different way because you're a developer and you're like, yeah, right, let me just pop this on and adjust it. Where are my controllers? Yeah, okay, got you. What?
And you kind of know
controls?
what to expect.
Yeah, right. And you know exactly what to expect. Doing it for the first time, I've done it to like my grandparents and stuff and had them, seated and showed them something like that first. And I think that's probably what makes a difference is how you introduce. What is your first experience in VR? Because I can imagine if it's like a horror experience or something, you may not want to put it back on. But if it's just like a seated, like something like Alumet by Penrose Studios, where it's a beautiful kind of little short film, something like that is a nice kind of introductory stage.
And I'm coming from more like consumer point of view and content creator, but also thinking about what's coming from the other side. I don't want to name the shows and the applications. There are too many. Too many, Rob. Too many. I don't know, but listen to me. This one time in Bandcamp, one time at a VR show, there was, and I think you might have been near me, Tanya.
I might have.
Where I was experiencing what was supposed to be an extension of a movie kind of a thing, but it was an animated thing. And the girl that was doing the demo was just like, hey, God, yeah, I'm kind of hired here to be a salesperson and dress like one of the characters and the experience you're about to have. And, okay, yeah, now look right. Okay, something's going to happen over here. And then da-da-da, and something's going to happen over here. And I just like,
Shut up.
Do you know what I'm watching here? Have you done it? Oh, once, yeah. So she didn't. No, she's there.
Yeah.
She was there just to be a show floor model, or if you're going to go to a show, you're there to sell yourself, but also you're there to represent your brand and your product and your company. You want to make sure the very first time you even talk to somebody, you got the right people on the floor, you got the right equipment, you got your cleaning apparatus, tomato. Rob, do you concur?
With cleanliness. Yeah, washing, right, guys? It's a big...
Having a good rep on the floor, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I think it's...
You want a douchebag at your stand.
No, I'm actually a huge fan of arseholes. That's my thing. It's like, put an arsehole out there, front and center, and
like
have
poop
them...
coffee.
Yeah, get a big chunk of poop coffee right there, front and center. No, this stuff should go without saying that if you want to persuade people, you need to be persuasive. It's not rocket science. Be nice, be kind, be informed, and be clean.
Okay, so I want to go back to what you were just saying there about the first experience and what we put people in, because personally, I just don't do horror anyway. But when it comes to VR and horror, I really feel like that there's a lack of understanding of what we put people through when we make them do a VR experience for the first time. That is a horror experience, because we are actually traumatizing these people. And one of the things that somebody was talking to me about was the first time they put their dad in VR, and their dad is afraid of heights. And they hadn't checked what the experience was that they were about to put their dad into. And it turned out to be the one where you're walking the plank across the, sky of New York or whatever it was. And the dad was petrified and obviously, was like, I'm not doing this. This is not fun. And the problem is, though, is that now his father, irrespective of what he will try to put him into, will not do VR. And that's one of the things that we have to remember, is that this is still such a new medium that somebody has a bad experience for the first time, they just paint the entire medium with the same brush. And the problem is that in the same way that watching a movie on a cinema screen versus a TV screen versus a mobile screen are three very different experiences. Experiencing VR on a mobile HMD versus a tethered HMD versus, a room scale collaborative experience, whatever these things are, they're very different types of experience. But it doesn't matter where you've had the bad experience. Once you've had the bad experience, that's it. You're just like, no, VR is not for me. Or again, with motion sickness, for example, once you've had the motion sickness, you're just like, no, don't want to put that on my head. No, it'll just make me sick. And they won't give it another chance. And I'm kind of curious whether or not anybody's kind of seen any examples of people who are actively trying to mitigate against this kind of lack of awareness and responsibility when it comes to first experience and first time that we put somebody into a VR environment. But Jess, I know you've got something to say, so join us in this conversation.
Literally the opposite. It was like my, I don't know, 20th time in VR or something. And I told the person, I do not like horror. I don't do horror. I don't even do Doctor Who. I don't like horror, kind of thing. And they put me through and were like, oh, no, just put it on. We'll just go through the opening credits kind of thing. I didn't even make it through the opening credits, because through the opening credits, it's horror. They sold it to me as something completely different, but it was, there's people hanging dead from the ceiling, and it's flashing and light, and zombies are coming out and screaming at you and things like that.
What was the name?
No naming names. But
you can say what that is.
But it was, I had told the person I didn't do it. And what still really annoyed me is not only did they laugh at me for doing it and for feeling uncomfortable about it, but they were like, what the hell? You're not even through the credit scene. And I'm like, No,
why
this is not.
Would you have to enjoy it though if it's not something you enjoy?
No, and it was more the fact that they were like, oh, Jesus, just get over it kind of thing. That I was like, are you kidding me? I don't like this kind of thing. I've said up front, I don't like this. So why are you making me do it?
You made me do it.
You wouldn't? Yeah. Would they bring you to a normal movie, to a cinema, and watch that? If they said you don't like it, probably not. Probably not. Think, but just you wouldn't bring a kid to you'd kind of have your own kind of filter a little bit, maybe.
I think a lot of the time the attitude is you just throw the headset on somebody and walk away, and a lot of the time, if somebody hasn't tried it ever, you're sitting there and you're just so disoriented. You don't understand how the controls work or what you're actually supposed to do with your eyes or with your hands or with whatever type of headset you're wearing. And I think the biggest disconcerting thing when you're in a VR headset for the first time and you haven't tried it before is that you feel alone and you feel helpless and you don't know how to make the thing work. So the big thing is making sure there's somebody there and you know that they're there, that can like help you and help you through the process. Yeah, so that you understand how to get to the good parts. Because if you don't understand how to even get to the part that you're going to enjoy, you're just going to be like, I'm confused and I would rather just have this thing off my head.
Exactly, I agree 1,000%. And or if you are going to show a demo to a total VR virgin, you could take that one. Make sure it's like maybe a 20-second experience or a 30-second, something really completely introductory where you know that you're not going to scare them away. Because ultimately, they're either going to kind of want to see more or they're definitely not going to see any more.
Rob, you got a thought on this?
No, I think, well, again, this stuff should be...
I don't like it is, Rob.
It should be common sense. I mean, it's like if you're throwing a dinner...
should be common sense.
If you're throwing a dinner party, don't open with monkey brains. I mean, it's not... You have to curate the experience.
But you're talking about...
Don't serve meat to a vegetarian either.
Yeah.
But you're talking about curating the experience. And the funny thing is that there aren't enough people who are curating the experience for the first-time user. And in fact, we
need to get this podcast out to all those people.
One of the fundamentals behind that, though, is this kind of confusion, if you like, about rating systems, for example, where if it depends entirely upon who the developer is, who the content creator is. If they come from a film background, then they're going to apply film ratings. If they come from a game background, they're going to apply game ratings. And so there's this kind of disparity over, A, how you rate it in the first place, what's the system that you're going to use, but also, B, the fact that when you experience something in VR or in an immersive piece of technology, it's that much more impactful than if you were just watching it on a screen, for example. So just because something is a 12 or a 15 rating on a movie, for example, in immersive tech such as VR or AR, perhaps it's an 18. But again, there is that lack of understanding around the fact that you do need to at least quantify and qualify for the user before they step into it exactly what that thing is going to be and how it could or could not impact them. And a great example of this is Control. I don't know if you've seen Control, which is, it's a VR experience, but it deals with domestic violence. And so there are trigger events that happen in that experience that, again, if you're not warning people before they even step into this, by the way, there's some triggers here, domestic violence, aggression, you may, if you've been a rape victim, whatever the thing is, you may not want to put this on your head. And again, if you're watching this in an exhibition environment or a conference environment, how do you make sure that you're telling people and making them aware that this content may be questionable in terms of it might not be something you want to forcibly put on somebody's head?
You have a clearance waiver. And you, as they're queuing up to try out your game, you have somebody nicely let people know ahead of time. But we'll also just put a little intro board on it, kind of rating. Just so a heads up, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Take the headset off now if you think you're going to feel uncomfortable.
That's
maybe if you're in a conference environment. It's all about demos anyway. That's
it, because we're talking about curating content, but a lot of the time you can't curate somebody's first experience because they're the one that stood in line to try out your experience. And if you've only got one to show, you can't mitigate that in any way. And there's also, unless they get there and somebody asks them, hey, is this your first time in VR? A lot of the time you don't necessarily know. So how do you do that? If you've not got multiple things to show and you've only got that one thing that may or may not trigger something inside them.
Are you saying we might be assuming too much that anyone going to a type of VR show or conference is in the industry or the space, but there could be some people who are there
Well, let me give
out
you
of curiosity, or like a Comic-Con or something, or maybe.
Well, no, so GDC it's not just VR. It's a huge spectrum of different things. But people queue up to try out the VR experience because I remember doing it for before I worked for Epic. But to try it out on Epic stand, because they did a thing in partnership with Weta where you got to meet effectively Smog, the demo, and something called the Thief. I remember doing that. I also remember, I think there is literally a video of me on YouTube of this, sitting crying on the floor and screaming because the dragon covers me in fire breath. It was the first time I've really
last week. Right?
That was It was that was my first time properly kind of doing VR. But what was really nice is about 4 people stuck their heads in to make sure I was okay. But I queued up to do do that, and you don't know how that's going to respond. Somebody's going to respond to it, especially when stuff comes towards you.
And the producer and the
but you're saying this, and we're talking about kind of conference environments and exhibition environments, but one of the things that we have seen, this emergence, this kind of trend that's emerging is VR arcades and pop-up VR arcades is a thing. Let's be honest. And I have seen a lot of examples of people with these pop-up, I'm doing little inverted commas for anybody listening, pop-up VR arcades, where actually they don't necessarily have a huge amount of experience with VR. They don't necessarily understand the technology, and they sure as heck are not curating the experiences. And in some cases, they are literally just saying, here is the Steam store, go for it, rather than let me curate what you're going to experience first. And so for the first time user and the people who are going to these pop-up arcades, the nature of the fact that it's a pop-up arcade means it's somebody who doesn't really understand the tech and is just trying it because it's popped up and it's there. So they don't understand what they should be asking for. They don't understand whether or not they should be asking for a protective mask or hygiene. They don't understand whether or not they should be saying, do you know what, I'm actually afraid of heights, so I don't really want to try the height thing, or whatever the thing is. They don't know what it is that they should or shouldn't be asking for. And certainly when we look at the types of people that are trying VR for the first time, yes, we have this whole bubble around us because we're all in the games industry and we're the kind of 1 or 2% of people who understand how this stuff works. But for the mainstream population of the people who haven't really got a clue about what this stuff is, they have no idea
what they need a major briefing, and you need to have the right person on the floor and the right person steering that ship of that pop-up, whatever it is. And now I do know companies that do have the pop-up style, arcade style things at theme parks and things like that. And they do a really great job of making sure that there's a training that goes with it. So you get the kit, you get the module, you get the game, changes every couple months, and the people that are running it get trained up on the tech and how to do it. Just like you at any fun fair, an amusement park or anything. You know the safety bits, you know the ins and out. You know if someone's really going to be sick on the twister, tilt-a-whirl, whatever it's called. You know what I'm saying?
Tilt-a-whirl.
No, the tilt-a-whirl. What's the teacups? Yeah, God, I hate those teacups.
They do call it the tilt-a-whirl.
There is a ride called the tilt-a-whirl, I promise you. But the point is, again, I'm just going to reiterate, it's about the responsibility of whoever that the person that is in charge of that.
Does anyone regulate these?
No, and that's the thing is there's nobody regulating. I'm sorry, I'm saying this because I've seen a lot of pop-up arcades come up in the last couple of months.
Avengers.
But there's nobody regulating to clarify that these people actually have any experience or understand what they're doing. And one of the things that personally frustrates me is when you speak to somebody who is doing a pop-up arcade or arcade, in general, and they don't experience the products that they're putting people in first. So they don't actually know what their users are actually going to experience. They're just like, oh, well, there's some software that'll allow me to run 10 headsets all at the same time. I'm just going to control it from here, and they're going to play the top 10 games that are out on the market at the moment.
So it's the manager of that arcade that needs a checkup from the neck up and not be running a thing that could scare off customers. Right?
But I'm just saying is that for some of these people, they're not thinking about it in that way. They're just thinking easy money.
Shouldn't be managing
this is a way to make money quickly. People are interested in this right now. It's really hot. I'm just going to put this thing together, throw some tech at it, and it'll work. And they're not necessarily thinking about that process and that experience. And
I think you can't rush people, especially with something like this, because it is a lot about the first experience. And if you are rushing somebody through it, they're not going to get experience. So I don't know, especially with pop-ups and things, I guess by virtue of the pop-up, it is a quick experience, but it should be really quality and not quantity. Like if you get a few people coming through your, pop-up or arcade or whatever it is, who are really, really connecting with the medium versus hundreds of people who are just going to walk away and never try it again. That's who you should be trying to cater to. Not
the bad word will spread around a lot faster than the good word. So in this beautiful day and age of instant, snappy, booky, facey, wacy, twittery, wittery, what else am I missing? Grammy. The Grammy. The tilt-a-whirl. Yeah, if you're running an arcade or running a amusement park or running a shopping mall, for God's sake, if someone's going to get a bad experience, it's going to spread like wildfire, knowing that. So even think like Westfield's down the road has these things. So.
That would be my question.
The negative will spread.
But has it though?
Has what, the negative?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to name names. I am not going to name names. But there was.
It's me, isn't it?
No, it's not Rob. Rob's awesome.
I can see in your eyes.
Look at
she's pointing at him right now.
Listeners, if you can see Tawny's eyes right now, I'm telling you.
Calm. No, but there was a particular pop-up arcade. I'm not going to name names, but anybody who went to this will know exactly who I'm talking about. Where they advertised, it was a pop-up arcade, and they said that they were going to have 10 headsets. They were going to have 30 retro game consoles. There was going to be Shoreditch-style street food. There was going to be a resident DJ, and all this other stuff that they promised. And then when they actually launched the thing, it was they opened an hour late, and when they opened, they didn't have any of the VR headsets working. So all these people who had signed up specifically to try VR walked in the door and were like, "Where's the VR?" And they're like, "Sorry, it's not working yet." So it took them an hour to figure out how to actually get their VR headsets up and running. And when they did, it turned out it was a 2.5-hour wait because they'd promised people it was unlimited free access to the VR once you'd paid the 15 or 20 quid to get in. But given that they only had 4 working headsets and over 1,000 people had actually bought a ticket,
£20 for an arcade.
I know. And so there were a lot of people who just like ended up stuck in the queue. And then when they got to the front of the queue, what they realised is that actually it wasn't to play a VR game. It was actually to try a VR demo because the organiser didn't understand the difference between a demo and a game. So they were giving people the opportunity to try 4 different demos, and they were only playing 1 demo on each headset. So you couldn't even pick when you got to the front of the queue after 2.5 hours. And so people who knew a little bit about it would get to the front of the queue and be like, actually, I don't want to try this demo. I've already done this. I want to try that other thing over there. And they were like, oh, okay. Go to the back of that queue. So it's another 2.5 hours. This is like literally less than a month ago.
What?
And so they were told to go back to the back of another queue. So it's taken some people anywhere between 4 and 5 hours to actually try essentially 2 minutes worth of VR that is not necessarily the best quality because it's a demo game at the end of the day. And so there was this real frustration, and there was a lot of negativity around that event and a lot of people demanding their money back. And, that word got around pretty quickly about how bad that experience had been.
That was, but they could then go anywhere else in the country and people wouldn't know about that.
Exactly.
Because I didn't know about that and I'm just down the road.
Yeah.
If you do hear about it on Twitter or anything, or, again, people pick up on Twitter and the socials.
Then you're asking people to be engaged in this area. And again,
and they're not.
And the people that are trying it aren't those people, so they're not going to know.
And that's the problem is
people that are trying the VR are not on social.
Well, not necessarily following the correct.
Yeah.
Well, not the correct, but following the same areas that we follow.
Because they're new to it. They're only coming because it's a pop-up and they thought it was cool and it's going to be retro and it's going to be VR.
They may not be following VR tech or anything.
Yeah, they have no
That's
idea.
the future of VR. Those are people you want to convert, hopefully one day.
Yeah. And instead, what's happening is this person is setting up these events, giving them a terrible experience and then moving on to the next city. And people don't know that that's the case. And so, 1,000 people or so at a time, he's basically giving people a bad experience of VR, which is...
But there's 70 million in the country. So it's a horrible moment where they can make money out of it.
Yeah.
And actually it kind of almost doesn't matter if they don't give them a good experience because they can go elsewhere. And there's nobody regulating it. I'm not endorsing this. I'm saying this is terrible.
But you're saying that they could they could go somewhere else, but the problem is
industry people, I think.
The problem is those people you're saying they could go somewhere else. The reality is they probably won't.
No.
That
sucked. I
don't want to try it again. Exactly.
Oh, no,
they're like, why would I pay for that again?
No, I'm talking about the people who organise it, not the people who have been ripped off. Yeah.
Okay. So, in closing, Rob is sitting there in silence, and it's your turn to talk, Rob. So, what I would really like to understand is what is the one thing that you think needs to I'm not going to say change, but people need to be more aware of. Like, if there's one element about the VR industry or the process of VR that we could educate the mainstream audiences about, what is that one thing that you would just like to kind of say to people? Be aware of this thing.
That's a big question. It'll pick me up from over there. It's not that exciting. What is the one thing that you want the mainstream to know about VR? Crikey. So for instance, if you look at any footage of a VR product on YouTube and read the comments underneath, you can see what people need to learn about. The biggest one is understanding that motion sickness doesn't exist anymore. And that's taking a long time for people to understand. It doesn't exist anymore. If you're making a decent quality product, it doesn't happen. And I can even see people in this room being like, huh?
So I'm going to give context.
Our eyes right now.
I'm going to give context to Rob's statement, which is a statement I made a while ago, actually, at a conference, which is there is no such thing as motion sickness in VR. There is only bad development.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's, there is a real issue with, following any Reddit thread on the topic, people who haven't tried VR with strong opinions on VR. And those are dredged up from like first generation screw ups.
The 1980s.
Yeah, well, not just from this round, this first generation screw ups about motion sickness and about frame rate and refresh rates, just obvious stuff that is now long fixed. Yeah, getting people to understand that is not a thing now if you're competent.
Okay. Debbie, what's your take on this?
my take on this. So, yeah, I think, like I mentioned in the panel, one is just the accessibility of things. So, you know, right now, when you think of VR, you think of like being in a padded room or being tethered to something, etc. But if you can wrap your mind around the fact that you can actually just like pop on a headset, throw your mobile device into it, and you can have a VR experience, and then potentially you will seek out more VR experiences because of that. I think that's one of the things. And also that you can, like, it doesn't have to be an elaborate sort of like horror show or something that you have to be thrown into. It can be like the simplicity of everyday things made really, really exciting. So, you know, like changing your workspace into an environment that you'd always want to be in to make you more productive, or yeah, just like that, these simple everyday connections. Like, it doesn't have to be a fantastical other world, even though that's really amazing. It can be sort of making the ordinary extraordinary in your everyday life. And that's something that VR can do for sure.
Awesome. Jess.
So for consumers, I'd say the stuff that VR doesn't kind of end with the stuff that you just see on TV. Like, there is so much more depth in like the different types of games, different types of films, everything that you see. There's so much beyond the kind of mainstream stuff that you'll probably see on like trailers on the TV and things like that. There's so much more, and those experiences are probably, there's something going to be out there for you. If you see stuff and you're like, oh, that doesn't interest me, there will be something that will line up with your interests in some way or some form. And to go out and actually look for it, and don't just be like, oh, well, I've not seen anything. Go and actually actively look, because you will find something there for you.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I think I like all of these answers. Good job, guys. That sounded patronizing. No, it was really good. I like. Okay, that's a wrap, guys. Guys, well done. Well, I think I'd like to recap on some of the things we just chatted about today. So, what do I want to see change is the kind of responsibility. I want to see responsibility change of anyone that's a creator or going to a trade show or being responsible for other people trying it out, to make sure that they know exactly what's happening and they love what they're actually going to show somebody. So if you are going to be working for any company or even volunteering to work at a trade show and you prefer sports over horror things, then try to find the applications and the experiences that are more sports led. You'll be a little bit more passionate about it. And even if it's like you like football, but it's a golf thing, then you can fake it a bit and still be excited by it. And everyone bring wipes with you. So I'll go back to the hygiene. So responsible people who are going to be the teachers, responsible teacher wizards, passer downers.
Why do you keep looking at me when you talk about wet wipes?
Okay.
The wizards of wet wipes.
So one of the things that I should
That
also
didn't happen, by the way.
It did. Don't believe her lies.
So one of the things that I think is worth probably mentioning as well is that we've talked a lot about conferences and consumer conferences versus non-consumer conferences, but we also should be kind of pointing out that things like film festivals should definitely be included in that kind of that group. So anybody who's listening from any of the film festivals, just saying, you might want to check it out and figure out how to educate your staff to show.
It's just a courtesy thing. It's just a polite courtesy thing. So even if you go to drive a car, I know somebody that does a car dealership in St. Louis. You know, they do wipe the steering wheels down after a test drive. They do make sure it's clean again. They make sure it's ready for the next test driver. And if you're treating anyone trying out the VR as your test driver, and I want to rewind slightly, but also if they are going to be new people, that's their first time, maybe have introductory different levels. So is this your first time? Here's a 30-second thing just to get a feel. Here's something else that might be, and are you ready to go full tilt? We're going to stick you in this room for 4 days and you can't take the headset off. No wet wipes allowed.
I think actually film festivals are generally, in my experience, been much better at doing that than games festivals, because
they care about that content. I think maybe not
There's
not
like
any
the
less,
storytelling
but,
aspect of it.
Yeah,
like
it's a
you
good
really
point.
Need to
Really
lead
good point.
somebody through something.
And just a sort of extension on the question about what do you want the mainstream to know who don't know VR. I think there's also something to be said about, for people who are working in VR and developing stuff, to not stop looking at what can be done. It's very interesting watching 360 content now, and I remember I was in a panel. I'm usually a very friendly presence in a panel, but I ended up getting yelled at by somebody at a panel the other day.
That was an hour ago.
It was 25 minutes ago. It was actually just as we were coming in. No, because it was a panel where the audience were predominantly people working in 360 live action production, and I said, look, in 18 months, what you're doing just isn't going to be the way to do it anymore. And it was strange talking to like DPs who didn't know what light field capture was. You need to know what can be achieved, because otherwise you're always going to be underachieving creatively, underachieving economically. You're going to do a disservice to the medium, and it'll waste everybody's time.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that there's new innovations happening all of the time, and the industry is progressing all of the time. So yes, staying on top of the new technology is incredibly important. But as always, we like to give our listeners a way to find out a little bit more about you and what you're up to. We ask you to do that by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. Would you care to share?
Sure. You can find me at Mookie Approved across all platforms, but I prefer Twitter. Hit me.
Twitter at Rob Yescombe.
I'm on Twitter at Deb Mensa Bonsu.
Following the lead on Twitter at Jess Hyder.
I love how none of you had the guts to say anything other than Twitter. So, in closing, as always, we'd like to thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd.
Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you, and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
digitaljamsessions.com